Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Collage Live online. Thank you for joining us. I'm Christopher Kurtz, the coordinator for Collage Institute, and today we're going to be talking about our newest publication, The Awakening by Kate Chopin, illustrated and interpreted by contemporary collage artists. Collage Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit organization whose mission is to support artists, curators, and writers who seek to study, document, and disseminate ideas that deepen our understanding of collage as a medium, a genre, a community, and a 21st century movement. We operate a number of initiatives meant to bring together community, investigate critical issues, and raise collage's standing in the art world. We are able to do these projects thanks to our wonderful supporters. So if you are able to, please consider making a donation or joining our Silver Scissors and Golden Glue societies. More information about that can be found on our website. This is the second book from our Collage and Illustration project, which is a series of residencies, publications, discussions, and exhibitions that takes vintage public domain stories and recontextualizes them for a 21st century audience through the use of collaborative collage illustrations. The Awakening focuses on Edna Pontellier, an upper-class New Orleans woman torn between expectations and desires. In the beginning of the novel, Edna appears to live in a semi-conscious state, trapped in the mundane aspects of her life. As the story evolves, she encounters new people and experiences that create an awakening shift within her. Edna begins to view her world differently, and through this lens, new relationships emerge while others become strained. In the end, Edna realizes that even if she has her own desires, she is still trapped by her societal role. In October last year, Nancy Bernardo and I, along with the help of Wiley Garcia and Heather Ryan Kelly, led a dozen international collage artists through a virtual residency where we analyzed the story, discussed themes, uncovered symbols, and asked questions to visually interpret this seminal feminist text for a modern audience. Today, we are joined by a handful of those artists. In a minute, I'm going to turn things over to Nancy to lead us through a discussion of this process. But before I do, I just wanted everybody to go around and introduce themselves. Say your name, where you are right now, and a brief sentence about your artist practice. So for example, I'm Christopher Kurtz. I'm a storyteller and collage artist in New Orleans, and my work focuses on themes of empathy and environmentalism through the lens of science fiction. In addition to coordinating this project, I also contributed to the illustrations in the book. Nancy, would you like to go?
Sure. I'm Nancy Bernardo. I am in Rochester, New York. My work relates to a lot of themes around women, body image, and just social context. I teach graphic design. I'm right now teaching at University of Rochester. So I'll hand it off I'll call out Mercedes.
I think Mercedes might have been frozen. So how about Leslie?
Sure. Hi, I'm Leslie Finn. I'm based in Guilford, Connecticut. I'm a visual artist and a writer. And I would say my work really interrogates themes of gender, how narratives work, especially inherited narratives in families. And I'm always interested in the supernatural and the ethereal.
And Dimas?
Hello, everyone. I'm Dimas from Catamarca.
You're muted, Dimas. And I gotta fix your names.
Can't hear you.
Okay, while we wait for Dimas to figure out their microphone situation, how about Jose?
Hello, are you listening to me? Yeah. Hello, I'm Jose Sampaio. I'm from Brazil. I live near São Paulo here. And I work as a visual artist here and a motion designer for a long time actually now. And that's very nice for me that you are having me today here, and I hope to get the answers that you are waiting for. Thank you.
Mercedes, you want to try?
Hello, my name is Mercedes and Cueto, and I live here in Ontario, Canada, and I work as a massage therapist. And when I'm not doing that, I'm making art. And lately, I've been focusing on collages, and since the residency, I've been doing analog and digital collages.
Caroline, why don't you go?
Yes. Hello, everyone. So my name is Caroline, and I am in Montreal, Canada, Quebec, Canada. And I work with analog collage. And so I use handmade papers, usually Japanese handmade papers, and a mix of recycled papers. And I focus mostly on, I wouldn't say a specific theme, but nature really inspires me, as well as definitely women's issues, the supernatural, things like that, I would say are part of my work. And I am one of the illustrators in the Awakening book. I'll pass it off to Dimas if he can speak.
Yeah, you want to give it a shot?
Yeah. Let's try again. Can you hear me now?
Yes, nice.
Right. Well, I'm Dimas Melfi from Catamarca, Argentina. I'm an architect and a visual artist. I focus on making sort of talismans, souvenirs, things that could work as mementos, you know, involving nature, human feelings, textures, and a lot of vintage material. I like to work on many things, but I specialize on illustration, collage, and photography.
Mm.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Now, Nancy has some questions prepared for us. And if anyone in the audience has questions, please put them in the chat or use the Q&A function. And if we don't answer them as we go, we're going to have a brief audience Q&A portion at the end. Also, if there are any other artists that were a part of this residency in the audience, please sound off in the chat. Let us know you're here and feel free to give your own answers to any questions along the way. And then if there's time, I might try to get you to join us during the audience Q&A, maybe just voice or voice and video, depending on what's available. All right, Nancy, do you want to take us away?
Yeah, so I would just like to say a couple words about this project in general. I really was excited to do this project, and I was even more excited with those who applied for participation in this project, and those that we got to work on this project. It was such a great group of artists that we were able to get to work on this. It was really amazing. And so to have you all who were willing to be panelists today, I really want to thank you, because just seeing all of your work together in the book and seeing how much work you did and have it come together in the book, really, it gave me goosebumps just to see it all come together, because your work was just, I knew it was beautiful and I knew all of how talented all of you were, but to see it all together in one piece is just like, oh my gosh, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. So I really want to thank you, because it's because of you, you're able to kind of see my little dream come alive. And it was better than I even could have imagined. Your work, just incredible. And it was so great to work with you. And I wish it could have been in person, but it was great to have it be just what it was, because I think it still was just wonderful. So I just have to say that. And so for all of you out in the audience who maybe have not purchased the book, I really hope you do, because it's so incredible. And the work in there is really quite beautiful. And I think it really goes along so well with the words and the story. And again, I think the story is still, because it was, even though it was written in 1899, I still think it has so much potential for the 21st century, and it still has so much meaning for today's what's happening today in our atmosphere in our climate. And I think it was great to also have an international group of artists working together, and also to have male, female, different racial, ethnicities. So it was just so nice. And I hope you all in the audience get to get a copy of it. Okay, so my question. So here we go. My first question is, what made you all decide to join this residency? I can call on someone, or you can just jump in. All right, Caroline, you're right there in front of me.
All right.
Call on you.
Well, I was very intrigued by the residency, with the illustration of the residency, first of all, and then seeing that it was The Awakening, which was a novel I had already read and which I loved, and a classic, which I love classics. I was like, oh, I can't miss this opportunity, So that's why I applied. And just the opportunity to be able to illustrate a book was a first for me, and using collage was super interesting. And, studying the themes of the book as well, like feminism and patriarchy and identity, expectations, everything like that. It was super interesting to me. So I'm really glad that I applied and I was part of this project. Working with everyone was great. So yeah, I think that, Kate Chopin, the author, was really progressive in her time. And so seeing that it is so relevant today also was a reason for me that I wanted to apply to this and work on this project. And I'm glad I did.
Good.
Yeah.
Who else wants to speak to this? Jose, what about you? What was some reason that you applied to this residency?
So I would like to do a residence for a long time. Actually, this is my first artistic residence in and actually it's the second time I do illustrations for a book, but the residence is the first time. And when I saw the subject of the book, I didn't know the book. I haven't reading. So, but I think that was something important for me, to get to know the book in this. At this time, I didn't have an opinion about that before opinion about the book. So, and I have two children. I have two girls, and that's a matter that really interests to me. For a long time, I really think it's a very important subject in the world today. So I think that's it. That's
Yeah.
my interesting.
Interesting, yeah. So for some of you others, what were some of the strategies that maybe you used in deciding to illustrate the text for a modern audience? So what were some of the symbols, or like Leslie, Finn, what were some of the symbols or any sort of iconography that you used for illustration? Were there any things that you use that you normally wouldn't use, or things that you use from your usual toolbox of work?
Yeah, I think it was largely coming from the book itself and the discussions we had around the book. So several of my pieces, I used the moon as a symbol, which honestly didn't crop up to me in my own reading, but it came out in the conversations we had. So I think that collaborative element of the residency was really crucial to developing some of those strategies. So that was one, and then it kind of led me on a path of really thinking more about natural elements, but then also veering more into like the occult. And again, to come back to a conversation that we had, I think it was Mercedes and Dimas had been talking about the possibilities of New Orleans at the time, there being like tarot readings, and there's this one figure that we were talking about, this lady dressed in black. And I'd recently done some work with tarot and I thought, oh, I can dig into this. And so that became definitely part of the iconography that I worked with as a constraint in some way, like thinking about what if an illustration were a tarot card and it reflected a moment in the character's life. But yeah, it really comes back to the conversations we had, which were just so generative.
Yeah. And Mercedes, what about you? What were some of the strategies that you used for creating your work?
I guess again from the text, some of the characters, minor characters, like sorry, I was just thinking. Well, for example, like the best way I could describe it is on page 100.
Yeah.
Like that image to me reminds me like of fabrics. Like I'm interested in fabrics, so I thought of tablecloths, the island, the monarch butterfly that kind of flies from one place to another, like Mexico to the United States, Canada. And I was thinking about borders, and so when I read something, I usually get like images, memories. I usually work a lot from memory.
Yeah.
Personal memories, the book. So it's usually like a rush of different things that come to mind. Also, again, the conversations we had.
Christopher, can we get some of the images up too? I don't know if we're doing that. Yeah, so on page, so I was wondering if we could get maybe Leslie's one image up, which is page 100 is right. 100 Mercedes is your, so page 100 is Mercedes, and then Leslie, the moon one is I should know this by now. Oh, here it is. Here's one of them. Is on page 190. Just for the audience to see. Oh, and then the other one is 202. So the audience can kind of see the imagery that they were working with. And for both of you, Mercedes and Leslie, these were this was also imagery that you were working with previously, did you say?
Well, part of it's like components. Like this is actually I developed this piece for the book,
right?
But it was actually an old print that I flipped over and started drawing on the other side, and then creating layers,
right?
And using objects, and then along with
105, Chris. Sorry.
Along with the digital. Yeah, but the image came from the text, well, from the book we were reading, and then how I would interpret it.
Gotcha.
For me, it was all new.
That was all new. Right?
The materials were consistent. I love working with old, just found objects, and I had been given a stash of late 1800s, early 1900s photos that I knew would be perfect for the project. So it was really the process, that analog process, but all of the imagery in terms of the kind of lunar metaphors and the tarot was new in collage for me.
Right. And then sorry, here we go. 20. Oops. 202 is yeah, there's the first one, and then 202 is the other one of Leslie's.
So that's actually one piece gave way to the other. Again, coming out of our conversations, Dimas had talked about cyanotype. And so this is an attempted cyanotype of the previous collage that totally failed. it failed several times. And then I ended up stacking the transparencies that I used to attempt this cyanotype and realized, oh, it's actually, this is the composition staring at me in the face.
Right. Which is always kind of nice. And I'm wondering, and this kind of goes off of my questions a little bit, like out of what, although maybe this is some goes into kind of one of the questions I was going to ask was like how maybe you stepped outside of what your normal artistic process was. So trying maybe something different or having kind of like that accident, like going for something that you normally would have done, but then having an accident with your work. And maybe that's one of the collages that ended up happening. So I'm curious if that happened to for anybody. And also, since Dimas, also you're one of the people that had a conversation about some of these kind of like witchcrafty objects. Did you want to add anything to this as well? Like what type of symbols you might have used or strategies you used for your work as well?
Well, at first I had like many folders full of pictures and photographs and illustrations. And at first I thought I was going to need like many layers, you know, for every collage I was gonna make. Because, you know, I had this idea of representing the density that there was all over in those times, you know, like by the end of the 19th century. Because, you know, the clothes, the distances, even the communications were kind of messy and, you know, like very heavy. So I thought that I was going to work with many of that symbolism. Like I was going to use way more elements that I finally used. Because, well, my way of working is like, you know, putting a lot of things on the table all around the paper. So then I start to choose, and, you know, there are many things that in the end you don't use. So that happened to me working on digital this time. Is
there a piece in particular you want to talk about as well? Is there one piece, you know, a piece or two that you want us to look at in particular? Because you have a piece on page 65. And then there's and then there's your fire piece as well. I don't know if you want to talk about anything in particular.
Yeah. Well, that kind of happened to me with this one, but also with the others. Yeah, I was going to add way more things, but then I realized that most of them weren't necessary. So I had, you know, this postcard with the beautiful moon and, you know, that seaside picture. It's really beautiful. Then this photograph, also that kind of dove, I found it. You know, it's like a pin, a vintage pin. And well, many of these things I found them on the internet. So, you know, I was going to use like, I don't know, 3 times more things, but then I started to, you know, discard them. And well, maybe the witchery and, you know, many texts I was cutting off, all those got missed because I realized that they weren't necessary, really. So, you know, if the piece could work as it was, you know, as this one, then I was happy with that. And then I would move on and, you know, try to illustrate a different thing.
Which page did you say the fire illustration was on?
Yeah, that one's on, let me grab that really quick.
And, you know, another part of the process was that at first I made a lot of sketches.
149.
Which I shared with everyone.
Yeah.
And, you know, even then I was like using many more elements that I finally get to use in the end.
Right.
Yeah, with this one, this was kind of, you know, I was lucky to find, you know, this sort of poster is a poster. No, It's the cover of a music sheet. You know, the fire one. And
Yep.
then I had these feathers background. I wanted to use them for a different illustration, you know, because I was always having, well, we already shared about it, you know, many times during the residency, that we could see Edna as a bird. You know, it could be a different bird for everyone, but well, I had this idea, you know, it was recurrent. And then I found this pair of pigeons, you know, this pair of birds. And while the text for the music sheet and the illustration, you know, it was like everyone was saying, I mean, sorry, I meant to say, I thought that these things were asking me to make something out of them. So, you know, it was like very fluid work. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What other things or any other strategies that others felt that they used that maybe also made you kind of step out of your normal process, your normal way of doing things? Anything else?
Well, yeah.
For me, one of the most important things I think of the residence is like to work with another artists and to share these research of symbolism in iconography and these kind of things. Because I used to work a lot alone here, so this for me, it's the most important thing for me was the sharing of everything. So you can take some ideas from another people, from other artists, and you see how they manage to work with to transform the tests and ideas in images, and this is for me it's most important thing that happened here. Nice.
Jose, with your work too, in general, was there anything that you did that kind of surprised you? So you've got, I'm going to talk about your piece on 145 is one of Jose's pieces. Was there anything about any of your work that surprised you or that you did that was different because of this kind of this exchange or this different way of working maybe, or working with other people?
Yes, I think so. I think actually that I was telling you, I think all of this image that we were getting from the other artists and everything, so that makes me rethink the way to put my image together. So because I came a lot from the motion design, you know, like and for me it's the other way around. For me, everything has movements, and I'm always thinking about the image with movements, and for me to make a frame or an image that is not in movement, so it makes me think a lot about the symbolism of the image, or how to construct, how to make this narrative for one single image that can makes the people think about that piece of work. So I think that's it. That's it. The really nice thing for me was to see how the other artists deal with these questions of to transform the ideas in pieces of work.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Thank you for that too.
I think Mercedes wanted to say something also.
Yes, go Mercedes. Sorry.
Like, I think I already forgot. What was how did the question go again?
about symbolism you might have used, or strategies you might have done, stepping out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, for me, I was planning just to do hands-on analog collage, and then seeing what people were doing, I thought, oh, maybe I'm going to try this. So for me, it was just working with the digital aspect. But what I ended up doing was combining both. I wasn't just doing one. So I was doing hands-on, then using layering photograph, or mirroring images, or like I would take, for example, textures like rubbings of lace, and then used it, like combine the digital aspect and the analog.
Yeah. So can we talk about the one on 167? I don't know if you want to talk about that one, or you have another one you want to talk about.
Yeah. So yeah, this one here has, yes, you can see this is an image of lace, and then some just circles, because we kept talking about the moon and cycles and stuff. So that's a combination of hand-drawn and the layering.
Yes.
That's the aspect I would have used, obviously digital, but yeah.
But you added your analog techniques into that one as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I really like that.
And the lace, so you can see the layers. Yeah, and some text.
Yeah. Really beautiful. That's one of my favorite ones.
Um,
I mean, I love them all, of course, but like there are ones that I just, oh my gosh. Yeah, it's a good one. Caroline. Yes. Yes. Go.
Well, continuing with the layering, that's also what I used. So working with themes was kind of different for me. So when we spoke with Wiley Garcia, she mentioned romanticism of a landscape. And then I thought about, the decor, and that came up a lot for me. And so I used kind of paper as decor and as layering, and that kind of made me pushed me in outside of my comfort zone a little bit. So yeah, I used that.
I want to talk about anyone in particular, because I want to speak about yours as well, because yours is, and this is what I love about the book as well, and all your work, everybody's work, is that, everybody takes such a different direction, has such a different style, and yours is such a different style, right? So let's talk about like specifics. One of your, yeah. Let's
it could be, 78 or 171.
Great. Love it.
Either or.
Let's go to 78. Oh no, 171. You're there quicker, Christopher. Sorry. Go to 171 first.
The one before, this one.
Go there.
Yeah. So behind that one, I used a sheet of paper for the decor, and then I used photography to photograph my work, which was, handmade paper, but layered.
Right. So some of the participants that came in, everybody's coming in from different backgrounds. So some people are much more in the digital world and have more computer, let's say, I don't want to say technical ability, but some people are used to working on computers, graphics, or whatever. They just might be more into scanners or working digitally, and then others are more analog. And so with Caroline, you were more of an analog artist, but I love the fact you were photographing your final pieces, which I think is actually, and I like to photograph my work and actually then bring it in digitally, because I think it gives the work I just think it gives it a different depth.
Yeah.
It makes it doesn't give it, it's not as flat. Feeling, right. And you can scan things in and still get kind of that depth. But this, I think, gave it more of like almost like a shadow box feeling.
Yeah, definitely. And you can also work with it to, adjust your work. Basically.
Yes. And so that's one thing I loved about how yours ended up looking.
Yeah.
Really see those shadows that in Photoshop you could maybe play with to create that.
Yes.
But when you're taking a photograph of it, I don't know, it just, that analog aspect gives it more of that realness. Yeah. You know,
Yeah,
it's much
definitely.
more
And that was
natural.
interesting to work with, for sure. Even though I did dabble a bit with digital with GIMP.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which I think was great.
So that was new for me as well. Yeah,
Great.
definitely.
Hmm.
But analog is, you know, part of my practice because I work with handmade papers and, you know, I love texture and I love the feeling of paper. So,
Right.
but
And then
using kind of combining both techniques with the photography was interesting.
yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. And then your other piece was on page
Next to page 79, I had a couple, but this one, yeah, that was more like decor.
yes.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, same thing.
So that was a lot of layering.
Yep.
Yeah.
Nice.
And yeah, so you know, it was more like thinking of the story and then building on that, but using the themes as well.
Mm-hmm.
Themes of the, you know, Victorian kind of the way they were dressed and using paper with that. Yeah, just the whole setting of them, that epoch, but you know, using today's kind of papers,
Yeah.
and imagery.
Right.
Yeah.
I definitely appreciate that. So you definitely are giving this a contemporary feel because it feels, and it actually also feels a bit like a mood board. It reminds me of that.
Yeah,
Feeling
a little
of
bit.
mood
Yeah.
board, right? Like as if, you know, what we do in design feels, or film and animation, or, you know, set does, you know, when you're creating something to, you know,
Yes,
motion
definitely.
design, animation, graphic design, fashion design. So I love that. I like the vibe. You're kind of setting the mood for the scene.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So here's another question for all of you. How was it, how did a close reading of the book change you or affect you? And maybe your work, or maybe how, you know, as you read it, as we got into the month, did it change anything that maybe you had started thinking about, maybe when you came into it, maybe as you read it, you changed your mind about or thought differently about? Leslie, do you have any thoughts?
Sure.
I know you have thoughts, but just specifically about that.
I really felt the experience of reading alongside so many people was new to me, especially in a creative context. So I'd done this before as a college student, and really looking at a book like this for meaning within the text. So it was, on the one hand, sharing all these readings with other people, just in that, outside of that academic context and in a creative context, was just fantastic. But then also on top of that, to have the special type of reading where you're reading for image and symbol, and it's just a different relationship with a story that, you know, I've read a lot of things in my life, and it was the first time I really approached a text that way. And so that was pretty seismic for me, and just so energizing. Again, hearing not just what one or two people thought, but over a dozen of us were sharing our ideas. Yeah.
Any other thoughts on that one? Or
It's interesting. I think when you read a book just for pleasure, you follow along in the main character's shoes, and you see what they see, you think what they think. But when we dove into it, we really picked it apart, and we started paying attention to all of these periphery characters, and we talked about sort of the privilege that Edna had to even question her own existence. And because there's also these other characters who are just working and living, and they're in the poorer side of town, and they don't have that advantage. You know, they're just literally just living their lives. And Edna gets to spend a lot of her day thinking about, you know, what the majority of the book is about. And I like that we got to get into things like that. and then draw those characters out also in the illustrations.
I agree. I think what's so nice about this, and what I've always liked about like even just like book clubs or in general, or just reading things like as a group, is that there's so many things that I miss. And so it's so nice to have others point out things and say, oh, you know, or what about this, or did you see this, or just have different perspectives on it, which is always nice, you know, to be like, oh gosh, I didn't even think about that, or I didn't notice that. So that's what's always refreshing. And that's what, again, I was just really hopeful for this project. And I think that's was nice to see, that the different perspectives and to pull out those different types of characters.
Yes,
for sure.
Dimas?
Yes, I was gonna say that, you know, I first read it in English, then in Spanish, and at last I got like a Spanish audiobook. And each time I was approaching to the book, I had different feelings. You know, it happens probably every time I get into a different book. But, you know, at first I was like fascinated by the whole context, you know, that time, that place, you know, all about her internal and external journey. Then the second time I was like very critical on her way of taking things, you know, like her attitude and how everyone was like, you know, letting things happen. Like, you know, it was all about fate, you know, all around and all over. And then the last time I got to understand Edna a little bit more. But by then I was like having all these influences from, you know, everyone else's interpretations. And then I realized that the best we could do was like, you know, acting like fate itself, like, you know, taking all these characters and the story and seeing where it could, where all that context and all that work, you know. And then I started to feel a little bit better about working with this classical tale, you know, because it's I know it, in English it's very relevant, maybe not in Spanish because, you know, it's not so well known as others, but I know about its influence and it was important for me not to take it lightly. So that was like my final conclusion, you know, like, okay, put hands to work and then see where you can go. Okay.
Anyone else? Any other thoughts? Or Mercedes, did you have something you wanted to add? Or
oh, I was gonna, well, yeah, the first time I read the book, I think I had a more romantic sort of take on the book. And then the second time, well, I mean, there was still, maybe because of time and as I got older, it wasn't as romantic. There was, you know, I was sort of seeing things in a different lens. And yeah. And so I think I might need to read it again now with the images to see what kind of interpretation comes from the book. So that's something I want to do, and see how I feel about it, because I think I went from one side to the other side, and now I'm going to read it again and see where I land. But yeah, the fact that, you know, the thing when I first read it, I was like, wow, you know, a married woman deciding to leave her family because she wants to become an artist. And the second time I was like, oh, Edna is kind of maybe, I don't know, delusional.
yeah,
You know, spoiled maybe a little. I don't know. So let's see what happens when I read it.
Yeah, definitely.
And privilege, definitely privilege.
Yes.
Right. So.
Yes.
Also makes it a great book for this project is it makes itself available for multiple readings over, you know, there are those books that we all go back to, you know, every few years or so, and this can definitely be one of those.
Yeah, absolutely. So my last question is, did you take anything away from the residency that you now use in your own practice? And what was the most surprising thing, and or what was the most surprising thing that maybe you discovered?
I can
Yeah, go for it.
say something. I was surprised that I actually enjoyed the digital aspect of making collage. I never really thought about it. I had no idea that, well, not that I didn't know people were doing it, but yeah, I actually really like it. I want to continue working in the two formats.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe continue. I'd like to participate in another project in the future.
Yeah, good.
Do I don't know, that the Scotland residency looks interesting, and I
Yes.
don't know, we'll see. Yeah. So
Let's all go to Scotland.
Yeah.
Let me know when you apply. I'll apply as well.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully we'll all get in together, but
Yeah.
meet you in Scotland. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, just to do a bit of advertising for
I know, seriously.
our programs real quick. I mean, I think that's something, so like this residency and this project is very heavy on collaboration. And we've kind of like danced around that subject a little bit during this call. And I just want to kind of make it more explicit that there was a shared Google Drive of folders and images that everyone contributed to, and folks were encouraged to pass projects back and forth and use those materials and also those interpretations that we were discussing in our book discussions. And so in that way, it became this, we became this sort of design team working together on all of these pieces. And so there are authors behind most of these images, but the authorship is also shared over the whole group. This piece is a piece that I submitted, but I didn't collect any of those images. I picked every piece of that collage was submitted by a different artist in the group, and I just went through our folder of shared images and found things that spoke to me, just like I would in my normal collage process, and then assembled it into this. And I think, but all of our residencies at Collage Institute are heavily focused on the community creation aspect. So even though they're not all collaborative focused, they are all about the sum of the parts are greater than the whole, or I think I mixed that up, but you know what I mean. Strike that, reverse it. But that everyone brings something to the table, and that community building is a really important part of all of our residencies.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And for me also, I thought that it was so interesting to see that how collage is so well like combined to literature or to writing. Like it goes so well together. And I thought that's surprising, they're kind of like poems, if you can say that.
Yeah.
And like collage in itself is a modern approach. So it's really cool to see that, it can be translated to a modern audience in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Anything else that you took away from the residency that you maybe use now?
Well, I definitely work a lot more on digital, because I always liked to work more with my hands on the table, maybe not even gluing things, because I want them to look light and fragile. I need fragility to be all around and to express itself in a way, like, you see things like there are layers, but maybe, the wind could blow them all away, and then you need to start all over again. Mm-hmm. But with this residency, I started to think a little bit more about, keeping things fixed and like all glued, and it's like you take a photo and then that's all you got. By then, maybe tomorrow you can start all over, but this photograph of this instant, this impression, this emotion is important.
Yeah.
And well, I kept working on digital since then. And maybe the most important part was like learning from others. That's the main interest I had on this residency. I wanted to learn and see how others could work, and learning about their process, that was like priceless. The best part, maybe.
Yes, definitely.
I
Sharing.
agree.
Yeah.
And let's see if anybody has any questions that they want to ask. Oh, and I see Rosemary is in the audience. She said, let's see, I think her message was only sent to us, not the rest of the chat, so I'll read it. She said she attended the residency because she had read the book and wanted to explore the themes while exploring a new collage technique of lushly painted backgrounds, layering and using multiple images to create the illustrations. It's a process she has adopted now in her daily practice, to answer that last question.
Awesome. That's great. Very cool.
Oh, and Leslie Bellavance is in the audience as well, tuning in from Michigan. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being a part of this project.
Ah,
Dominique is in the audience as well. And she said it encouraged her to do things more analog, since she tends to work more digitally because of her teaching process. So yeah, so everyone got out of their comfort zone. That's a big part of our collage and illustration residencies in general, is kind of asking people to do things that they haven't done before.
It would have been lovely to meet in person.
yeah. We will one day.
Yeah, one day.
Definitely.
Yes.
Someone asked, as someone who does not often work in collage, I'm curious if any of the artists felt limited by the available depictions of women from certain historical moments in photographic or illustrated history. That's a great question. Leslie, you're nodding. Do you want to speak on that?
I mean, I have a stash that I used for this project that was given to me. So all 19th century, early 20th century photos, and all the women in them were white and upper middle class, because to afford those photos, that kind of photography at the time, and that for all of those structural issues that we've talked about in viewing this book through a social justice lens, yeah, there was a lot of limitation. So I think that limitation teaches us a lot. So we then look at the source material a little bit more critically, and wondering, well, why isn't this out here, and what's lacking in the kind of digital archive to do this kind of work. So I think it was that kind of, again, that limitation was really instructive.
The thing that we didn't really talk about that I realized later, of course, it's always like hindsight, that we didn't really discuss was actually using more images of contemporary people, right? Or contemporary women, or contemporary women of color. We didn't even discuss that I'm like, oh man, why didn't we even go down that road or path? And I'm not quite sure why, if it was partly just like the nature of how things went, I'm not sure, but we definitely could have, right? But we didn't. So I'm not sure why, but no reason why that couldn't have happened.
Yeah.
It just never came to that place. And it wasn't that I don't think anyone was open to it. It just, yeah, we didn't naturally come there. It would have been great though.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like I was sitting there just waiting for it. It's just like, I wasn't even, yeah. So I was, yeah, anyway.
I think there are, I mean, it's not, I think a lot of people got really into digging through archives and finding
Yeah, exactly.
images of time period appropriate female figures. But there are contemporary images throughout the illustrations as well. Like it still made its way into the book.
And I think there's definitely right. And I think there was a mix. And I think that's part of like also part of the process, right? When you're first starting something and you're working, and then you work through all of those things, right? So I wonder if like we had like another month or another 2 months, like then would that have gotten to that place? It might have, right? It might have evolved into more imagery that way. I don't, which, it's all part of the learning process. So that would have been interesting to see how it could have evolved if we had more time, or, because again, it was, it was a month, but it was also, we only met once a week.
Exactly.
So it's not, and we all had jobs, so it's not like, we were all doing other things or had life things happening. So it wasn't, but.
Yeah, it's a quick process, isn't it, for a book? Now that you are saying that, that's really true. And I remember we had some discussions about the women nudity as well, as what would be in the book that would take us to the nowadays, and that's very interesting. That's a very interesting process.
I think as well, if you looked at a 1898 illustrated version of The Awakening, it would be very literal, right? There would be scenes that would be in etchings or drawings. And I think what everyone did that was really cool was we kind of read between the lines. And so one of the ways in which I think that the book, the illustrations reflect, and I think collage lends itself really well to this, reflect a modern stance, is this kind of dive into the subconscious and these unconscious associations that crop up while we read. So though like some of us were using older imagery, it was from this less literal, more like nebulous context.
Yes.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
And then we're getting pretty close to the end of the event here. Final thoughts from anybody? Anybody feel like they wanted to say something but they didn't get a chance to?
Well, I wish we had way more time for, working and sharing, because it's like you always get the idea that it's never enough. So I don't know. It's like I kept open to work with any of you and any other, and I will still be here, for everyone, because I don't know, I felt that was the main part of the residency too, that's why it's international too, I guess. And it's like opening yourself to everyone else, and having this this attitude of being open and sharing. I don't know, it's like, I know it's like too naive sometimes, but it's why I like art and I like artists. So I don't know, that's my final conclusion, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need us now to do this, right? If y'all want to get together and illustrate a different book, I would love that.
Yeah, that would be fun.
That would be nice. It's true.
Yeah, and is our artwork ever really done? It's like at some point you just have to be like, it's finished and ship it, right?
That's true.
Yeah. No, it would be great though. Definitely to keep the connection, and definitely like more collaborative things would be really cool.
Yeah.
Mercedes, which book would it be?
Yeah. Let's figure something out, Dimas. Come on, let's do it. We'll be in communication. Let's email.
Definitely.
And as far as Collage Institute's Collage and Illustration program goes, we are about to do another residency in August to illustrate Frankenstein with a whole new group of artists, and very excited about that. Looking forward to it. Nancy and I will be leading that again. And I think Frankenstein is going to be an interesting book to put in front of collage artists, because there's a lot of overlap in metaphor there already. So thank you all for joining us today. And please go out and buy this book. You can find it on our website, and read it and let us know what you think. Drop us a line and tell us how the illustrations impacted your reading of this 100-year-old book. Thank you all for being here today and talking with us. Thank you, Nancy, for leading us through this.
Well, thank you, Christopher, and thank you all panelists, and thank you, all the people in the audience. Thank you for coming and being a part of this. It was great.
Absolutely.
Really
all right.
good.
Well, until next time.
Yes.
See y'all later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.